Okay, so this is our final class of this course. We have one more fairly important topic to cover. And to start with, after the prayers, I thought we could do a meditation, because last class we were looking at the 7 awakening factors, and the first of those is the awakening factor of mindfulness. So I thought we could do a meditation on mindfulness, because that's something that's come up again and again throughout the 37 harmonies. So to just get a better understanding of what mindfulness is, how important it is, and get inspired to generate more mindfulness. So while reciting the prayers, if you can, imagine the Buddha in the space in front. The whole visualization made of light, radiant, transparent, very beautiful, blissful, peaceful. Try to really feel the Buddha's qualities. Feel you're in the presence of someone who has unconditional love and compassion for you and every other being throughout the universe. And has completely freed his mind from all the afflictions and obscurations, all the things that cause suffering and prevent attainment of enlightenment. So his mind is totally pure of everything negative, totally developed in everything positive. And he's our friend. He's totally dedicated to helping each and every one of us and all other beings throughout space. He will never abandon us, no matter what we do, how deluded we get, negative things we do. But it will stay with us and continue helping us, teaching us, guiding us on the path until we have reached that state of enlightenment as well. I really feel Buddha as someone you can put your trust in, you can rely on. And as we take refuge, recite the prayer of taking refuge in bodhicitta, really feel we're doing this not just for ourselves, but for the sake of all living beings. We want to reach the state of enlightenment, awakening, Buddhahood, so that we can work just like the Buddha is doing now, work to help all other beings be free of samsara and all its suffering and reach enlightenment as well. I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Now we'll recite the mantra of the Buddha a few times. While doing this, imagine light flowing from the figure of the Buddha in front of you. The light is his realizations and excellent qualities in the form of light. And it enters our body, it fills our body completely down to the tiniest particles like the cells and atoms, and completely purifies all negative energy of our body and our mind. Negative karma, afflictive emotions, especially ignorance, obscurations, all these get purified, cleared away, become non-existent. And imagine the light also nourishes our positive potential, our seeds of compassion, love, wisdom, and all the other qualities we need to progress along the path, attain all the realizations of the path, and become Buddhas ourselves. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha. 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 So take a few moments to let your mind settle down, become free of other thoughts like things you did earlier today or what you're going to do tomorrow and so on. Just let your mind be in the present moment and the present place wherever you are. and to make this activity we're doing here tonight as beneficial and meaningful as possible, bring into your mind, into your heart, the spirit of altruism, bodhicitta, wishing to be of benefit to all living beings, to relieve their suffering. There's so much suffering all the time, just in this world, planet Earth. But there's other worlds as well, other realms where there's even worse suffering. And all those beings have been our mothers in past lives, they've been our fathers, they've provided us with all our happiness, all the good things, resources, and things we enjoy. So we've been dependent on other living beings countless lives from beginningless time. It only makes sense that we do what we can to repay their kindness. And the best way to do that, the only way to really do that, is to bring ourselves to the state of enlightenment, becoming a Buddha. And then we can work without any limitation or getting tired, needing a break, getting bored, but just continuously working with love and compassion and wisdom and many other qualities to be able to help each and every living being, guide them out of samsara, guide them to enlightenment. So what we've been learning about in this course, the 37 harmonies with awakening, these are all factors, practices we need to work on to develop, to reach enlightenment. So really feel that you're doing this, learning about these different factors for the benefit of all living beings. So let's do a meditation to explore the mental factor of mindfulness. So pick an object. It could be your breathing, or an image of the Buddha, or the feeling of loving kindness or altruism. And make the determination to keep your attention on that object without letting it wander away. So, in the terminology used to describe mindfulness, it means to remember and not forget the object. I'll just practice that for a few minutes. So even though we make the determination to remember an object without forgetting it or being distracted, it's not easy to do that. So inevitably our mind wanders elsewhere and forgets the meditation object. But when that happens, we need to notice it as quickly as possible and then replace the attention on the object, remember the object, and again, strive to stay focused on it without forgetting it. So it's introspective awareness that notices faults like distraction, forgetfulness, and so on, so that mindfulness can be restored. So when we notice our mind has wandered away, then that is introspective awareness that notices that, so that we can replace our mind on the object. So again, keep your mind focused on the object as much as you can, and let introspective awareness notify you when your mind has wandered away to something else, and then bring it back. So mindfulness and introspective awareness work together whenever we're meditating, whether it's analytical meditation like on the Lam Rim, or trying to cultivate calm abiding, serenity, or reciting prayers or mantras. They also play an important role in our daily life, not letting us forget the precepts that we have taken, or the ethical dimensions of the actions that we do, knowing the difference between virtue and non-virtue. And in general, just paying attention to, being aware of what our body, speech, and mind are doing, moment by moment. And if an affliction arises in our mind, it's noticed. If we have mindfulness and introspective awareness, we notice it. We know it's an affliction, something to be avoided, and apply antidotes to it. And when we engage in the practice of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, like on the body, feelings, and so on, then we train our mind to be mindful of our body, our postures, the nature of our body, and so on. And while we're doing these practices, introspective awareness is like a spy looking out for faults that might arise, like afflictions or distractions, and applies the appropriate antidotes. And then as we progress further in our practice, mindfulness helps us to eventually attain calm abiding or serenity, as well as insight into the true nature of things, especially emptiness. And when we finally attain the union of calm abiding and the special insight of observing emptiness, we attain the path of preparation, the second of the 5 paths. And on that path, we attain the power of mindfulness, and then later the strength of mindfulness. So these are more developed forms of mindfulness that are able to overcome the opposite state of mind, forgetfulness. So they're like well-developed, strong forms of mindfulness. And then when we realize emptiness directly and attain the path of seeing, we attain the awakening factor of mindfulness. And with that, the mind is thoroughly familiar with the 4 Noble Truths and can remain focused on them without being distracted by other objects. This very powerful form of mindfulness enables us to control the afflictions. So with the attainment of the path of seeing, all the acquired afflictions are abandoned. And then as we progress further along the path of meditation, we gradually eliminate the innate afflictions. So mindfulness plays an important role in all of this. It's not possible to progress along the path without mindfulness. So it does take energy to cultivate mindfulness and train our mind in mindfulness. And if we can clearly understand the benefits of having mindfulness, the disadvantages of not having it, we'll have more energy to work on it. So some of the disadvantages are, if we don't have mindfulness, we forget what is virtuous and non-virtuous. We forget precepts that we've taken. And so there's a greater danger of creating non-virtue and not creating much virtue. And without mindfulness, we can't keep our mind focused on our meditation object. So we won't be able to attain any realizations. even in daily life, a lack of mindfulness can lead to accidents, even the loss of life. And on the other hand, if we do have mindfulness, when we cultivate it further, it enables us to remember our precepts, remember the advice our teachers have given us, what is wholesome, what is not wholesome. And that way we can practice better, keep our precepts, create virtue. And as a result of that, we'll have happiness now and far into the future. Fortunate rebirths in future lives, and being able to progress along the path. And then, of course, ultimate goals of nirvana, enlightenment, especially Buddhahood, being able to help all living beings. So see if you can conclude the meditation by making a strong determination to work on cultivating mindfulness, increasing mindfulness as much as you can, both for your own benefit and for the benefit of all sentient beings. And we're going to meet mindfulness again in this next topic, which is the Eightfold Path. One of those is also mindfulness, so quite a popular mental factor in these 37 harmonies. So let's look at the slides for tonight. So this is the chart that we've been looking at a number of times over this course. It shows the 7 groups of the 37 harmonies. So we've already finished the first 6 groups. Now we have just the last one, which is here it's called the 8 branches of Arya paths. It's also translated as the Arya's Eightfold Path or the Noble Eightfold Path. So these 8 points were spoken about by the Buddha in his very first teaching, the first teaching he gave after his attainment of enlightenment. So he first spoke about the 4 noble truths, 4 truths of Aryas. And the 4th truth, true paths, he elaborated on true paths by explaining these 8 factors. So just for auspiciousness, I'll read that section of the sutra. He says, the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering is this. It is simply the noble eightfold path, namely right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And these 8 are also mentioned in Mahayana scriptures, like the Sutra on the 10 Grounds, and also in various texts from the Nalanda tradition. So we'll look later at some of the differences between the Pali tradition and the Mahayana tradition, and explaining these 8. So these, the chart says, the middle column says, these are completely pure paths of definite deliverance. Usually that term, definite deliverance, refers to nirvana. And when they are fully attained, the last column is on the path of meditation. So that's following the path of seeing. It's, you know, you're already an Arya at that time, and you're continuing to meditate on your direct realization of emptiness and gradually clearing away the innate afflictions. But in the Pali tradition, these 8 are taught in such a way that we can start practicing them right from the beginning of our path, of our practice. And in the book Following the Buddha's Footsteps, the Dalai Lama says, I appreciate the perspective of the Pali tradition in which we begin to practice them now as ordinary beings. In doing so, they will guide our lives until we actually enter the path. So, you know, and this presentation says that, well, they're fully attained on the path of meditation, which is a very high level, but of course you have to start practicing them before that. But yeah, the way they're explained in the Pali tradition is, yeah, like right from now we can start practicing these. So I thought that I would start by explaining them in that way from the Pali tradition, and then later we can look at how they're explained in the Mahayana. So the next slide gives the list of the 8. We'll go through them and look at each one. So yeah, 8 branches of Arya paths, or Arya's Eightfold Path. Those are different ways of translating. And each one starts with the term right understanding, right view, right thought, and so on. This word right can be a little tricky because sometimes we use that term in a rather egotistical way or even a judgmental way, like when we say, I always want to be right. I never want to be wrong. I always want to be right. So that's kind of a lot of ego there. Or if we're judging other people and saying, you're not doing it right. It's not the right way to do things. So the Tibetan term translated as right here is yangda. In Sanskrit, it's samyak. And other alternate translations for that term are correct or perfect. So if you're uncomfortable with the word right, you can choose another one. Okay, so yeah, I'll go through them a little bit more detail. So so right now, that's another way of using right. Right now, I'll just briefly explain each of the 8, and then we'll go through them again in a little more detail. So the first one is sometimes translated as right understanding or right view. And that involves understanding, like at the initial level, understanding cause and effect, how actions that we do lead to results that we will experience. So we are responsible for our own experiences. We are the creators of our own experience. So that's kind of the first important understanding we need to gain on the path so that we can start creating more virtue, avoiding non-virtue. Also included would be understanding the Buddhist worldview of things, how we're in samsara, we die and take rebirth again and again under the control of afflictions and karma. We're not created by a divine creator, and so on. But there's also the possibility of escaping from samsara, getting free and attaining liberation and enlightenment. So basically, just the Buddhist view of things, having a correct understanding of that. And the second is right thought, sometimes translated as intention, right thought, right intention. So that has to do with our way of thinking and our motivation for the actions that we do. And what the Buddha said in one sutra is to keep our mind free of attachment, harmfulness, and cruelty. So the actions that we do are motivated by non-attachment, non-harmfulness, non-cruelty. So we could just say in general, acting in a benevolent way and with generosity and unselfishness and so on. And number 3 is right speech. So basically that means doing our best to avoid non-virtuous speech, like lying, harsh speech, and so on, and instead speak in ways that are virtuous and beneficial. And then right action involves, this is more bodily actions. So we refrain from the non-virtuous actions of our body and do the actions that are virtuous. And then right livelihood has to do with how we make a living or how we get our needs, even if we don't have a job like monastics, then we still need to do things to procure food and shelter and so on. So basically this means refraining from wrong livelihood, wrong forms of livelihood, which we'll look at more later, and just behave in ways that are positive and beneficial. Number 6, right effort, is making effort to abandon what is non-virtuous, what is the cause of suffering, and instead practice what is virtuous, what is the cause of happiness. So in general, practicing Dharma, following the path, and so on, putting our effort into those things. And then mindfulness, right mindfulness, is keeping our mind focused on abandoning what is non-virtuous, practicing what is virtuous, cultivating the 4 establishments of mindfulness, and so on. And then the 8th is right meditation or concentration. So this means developing our ability to keep our mind concentrated, focused on an object of our choice, and work on transforming our mind. So this is the order that the Buddha taught when he gave his first teaching, the Dhammacakra Sutra, Sutra of the Turning of the Wheel of Dharma. And there's another sutra in the Pali tradition. There's probably many sutras where he talks about these, but there's one called the Great 40. It's in the Madhyamaka. And in that sutra, the Buddha said that right view should come first, because one needs to know the difference between what is right and wrong, what kind of behavior is virtuous, what kind of behavior is non-virtuous, so that then one can make sure that our speech, our actions, our livelihood, and so on are correct. There's also a way of explaining the 8 factors in terms of the 3 higher trainings, which we'll look at next. So in the book, Following the Buddha's Footsteps, His Holiness says that way of explaining the eight gives us ordinary beings clear and easy to understand directions about how to practice the Dharma in daily life. So the next slide shows how the eight factors can be classified according to the three higher trainings. Now, the first higher training is the higher training of ethics. So included in that is right speech, right action, right livelihood. And then the higher training of concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Then the higher training of wisdom includes right understanding and right thought. So in this way of arranging the eight, the first two on the other list come last on this list. So in a way, I don't know, this way of arranging them might be more according to what people are able to do. Like when we first develop interest in Buddhism and want to follow the path, we're advised to start by working on our actions, try to avoid negative types of speech, negative types of actions, create virtuous ones. So it's kind of easier in a way to engage in those things. And whereas cultivating right understanding and right thought is more challenging, it's harder to change the mind, harder to overcome wrong views and develop right views and so on. So that's why, His Holiness says that this way of explaining the eight gives us ordinary beings clear and easy to understand directions about how to practice the Dharma in daily life. So let's go through this way of explaining and look at greater detail with these eight. Okay, so higher training in ethics. So, right speech. This involves refraining from the four non-virtuous actions of speech and speaking in ways that are beneficial. So, what are the four non-virtues of speech? Lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, idle talk, sometimes called gossip, but yeah, I think idle talk is better. It covers more things. So yeah, speech that is about topics that aren't very important, that are kind of trivial, and that can stir up afflictions in the mind. So we try to refrain from those forms of speech and then practice the opposite. I mean, just refraining from those four types of speech itself is virtuous. But then we can also speak in ways that are opposite to those, like being truthful and speaking in kind of pleasing ways that make others feel happy rather than hurt their feelings. And then speaking in ways that bring harmony rather than destroying harmony. And then speaking about things that are meaningful and beneficial to people's minds rather than useless and detrimental. So there's a lot to work on there. Our whole life could easily be spent working on our speech. Then right action involves refraining from the three non-virtues of body, which are killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. So trying our best to refrain from those. And And then that itself is virtuous if we make this conscious effort to avoid those three actions. Then on top of that, so that itself is virtuous, but then on top of that, we can do actions that are opposite, like saving lives. You know, there's often opportunities to save the life of a sentient being that might be in danger of being run over by a car, or stepped on, or drowning in the water, and so on. So saving lives. And then being generous instead of stealing, giving, practicing giving, generosity. And then using sexuality in ways that are, if you do use sexuality, then use it in ways that are kind and compassionate and considerate, beneficial for others, rather than selfish and full of lust and attachment. And then right livelihood. So this involves avoiding wrong livelihoods. So the Buddha mentioned some forms of livelihood that are wrong, that are to be avoided, such as dealing in weapons, producing weapons and selling weapons, dealing in animals for slaughter. So raising animals that will be sold and killed. And I think that also includes being involved in the killing of animals, working in a slaughterhouse and butchery and so on. Slavery. So that still exists these days in the form of human trafficking, prostitution. So, and then poisons, I guess that means producing poisons, selling poisons, because those can be harmful for people. I guess that would also include insecticides and those people who, exterminators, yeah, people who come into the home and put poison for mice and insects and so on. And then intoxicants, so selling intoxicants. So that could include not just alcohol, but drugs. So those are the things the Buddha specifically mentioned, but we can add to that list maybe things nowadays that didn't happen at the Buddha's time. Pornography, for example. So any kind of occupation that involves non-virtue, afflictive states of mind, causes harm to sentient beings, and so on. And then whatever job we do, you know, even if you're working in an office and you're not doing any of these things, but make sure that we're acting in an ethical way, not lying and cheating and so on, talking behind people's backs, office, what do they call it? Backbiting, office politics. Yeah, so just trying to behave ethically when it comes to our livelihood. And then for monastics, and this also applies to lay people as well, but because monastics don't get jobs and earn salaries and so on. So there's this other list of 5 wrong livelihoods that we should avoid. So we normally depend on lay supporters for our food and other needs, but we should avoid these incorrect ways of behaving in getting the things that we need. So hinting is not asking directly for something, but dropping hints, like saying something like, "Oh, that jacket you gave me 5 years ago was so helpful. It was really warm and really helped me during the winter, but now it's falling apart." So it's kind of a sneaky way of getting someone to give us something. And flattery would be to express praise or compliments to somebody with the wish to get something from them. So, I mean, we should speak in a pleasant way to people. We should, you know, say words that are pleasing and point out good qualities they have and rejoice in good things that they do. But we just have to be careful of our motivation. If our motivation is, I hope this person will give me something, then that would be the wrong livelihood. And then bribery is giving something a small gift with the hopes that they will give us something in return. So, I mean, again, it's good to give gifts to people, but we just have to make sure our motivation is clear and not like a business deal. Coercion is kind of putting someone in a position where they can't say no, or using our power to influence them to give us something. Like, for example, saying to somebody, all the other sponsors gave $100. How much would you like to give? So, yeah, pushing people, making it hard for them to say no or give less than what you're asking for. And then hypocrisy is pretending to have qualities that we don't. So maybe normally we don't get up very early in the morning, we stay in bed really late. But if a potential benefactor is coming, then we get up really early and look like we're busy doing meditation and so on. So behaving in a hypocritical way with the hopes of gaining something from others. So we should be on the lookout for those and avoid them, behave honestly, and use correct livelihoods for gaining the things we need. So in following the Buddha's footsteps, it says that in the Pali tradition, each of the 8 factors has a mundane and a supramundane aspect. So the mundane aspect would be in the minds of ordinary beings who aren't Aryas, who haven't directly realized emptiness. And because our minds are still contaminated or polluted, we still have ignorance and other afflictions. So even when we engage in these kind of actions like right speech and right action and right livelihood, but if our mind is still under the influence of ignorance and other afflictions, they're virtuous. It's virtuous to do these things. We're creating the cause for fortunate rebirths and good experiences in samsara, but they don't lead to liberation or enlightenment. And then there are supramundane aspects of these, of all of these factors, and those would be in the minds of Aryas. So they are free of pollution, ignorance, and other afflictions, and they do lead to liberation. So we can't practice those until we're an Arya, but at least we can practice the mundane aspects now and then work on the causes we need to eventually become an Arya and then have the supramundane forms of these. So an Arya would still be practicing right speech, right action, right livelihood, and so on. So what do you think would be differences between the way an Arya is practicing, let's say just giving up the first of the non-virtues of body, abandoning killing. So when an Arya is refraining from killing and we are refraining from killing, what differences would there be?
when an Arya is refraining from killing, that Arya sees themselves and the other being in the action of killing all as empty of inherent existence.
Mm. Yeah, a bodhisattva Arya would think that way. A hearer, well, it depends on which school they follow. But anyway, they would have greater wisdom in general. An Arya would have a greater awareness of some form of emptiness, some form of selflessness when they're refraining from killing, as opposed to grasping at a strong I, solid I, who's practicing refraining from killing, and then the would-be victim that we could kill, seeing that person also as real and some kind of solid person. Yeah, so we are still under the influence of that kind of ignorance, not seeing things correctly, but it's still good to refrain from killing. But the way an Arya practices seeing the emptiness or the selflessness of all the things involved, it would be more powerful and more pure and a greater cause for liberation. No, it's up here.
The Arya won't be able to see the emptiness of objective existence directly when they are out of meditative equipoise. So it could be informed by it. So they might not be grasping so much, but it depends on their level of realization of that emptiness.
Yeah, but even from the beginning of being an Arya, beginning of the path of seeing, you have directly realized emptiness. And that's really powerful. That's the most powerful realization you can have of emptiness. And so your mind is definitely going to be influenced by that, even when you come out of meditation, you're walking around. So, yeah, you can't directly perceive emptiness when you're out of meditation, but your mind will be influenced by that. So, you know, things will still appear inherently existing, but you know that's not the way they are. So you wouldn't be grasping at that appearance.
Would an Arya still be capable of non-virtue?
An Aryas don't create any throwing karma, like the karma that causes a rebirth. So they no longer create new throwing karma. Yeah, they do still create karma. I can't remember. There was something I read about this, but I can't remember exactly what it is. But I think mostly they would not create any non-virtue, because having realized emptiness, what I've heard it explained is that when you can see directly that things are empty of inherent existence, they're merely labeled by the mind, then your conviction in karma becomes even stronger, because you know that that's how things exist. That's the cause of what appears. It's because of karma. The cause of what happens is because of karma. There's no inherently existing person anywhere. There's no inherently existing action anywhere. No inherently existing anything. So the inherent existence isn't the way things exist. And so they have even more. I don't, I don't understand this, but this is what I've heard. They have even greater conviction in the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. So they're more determined to act in accordance with karma, more careful to avoid non-virtue and create virtue. So that's what I've heard. That's what I understand. I mean, I guess there's still some possibility of some affliction arising because they haven't completely eliminated the innate afflictions. Those are still there in the mind. They might arise and they might engage in something. I don't know, it just seems very unlikely that they would create any non-virtue. But I can't be sure about that. But they definitely don't create throwing karma, causes for rebirth. So now the karma they create is bringing them ever closer to liberation. Okay, so then the next is the higher training and concentration. So this has three of the 8 factors. The last 3 on the list mentioned the way the Buddha mentioned them originally. So right effort. So right effort means practicing the 4 supreme strivings. Do you remember those? We learned about those a couple weeks ago. They're another group of the 37 factors. Do you remember what any of those were?
To increase virtues that haven't been cultivated, to cultivate virtues that haven't been cultivated, to increase those that have, to decrease afflictions that have arisen, and to prevent the arising of those that haven't.
Good. Yeah. So, yeah, practitioner serious about attaining liberation or enlightenment would be putting their effort, their energy into those 4 practices, basically abandoning, overcoming, eliminating whatever is non-virtuous, and practicing, cultivating whatever is virtuous. And then right mindfulness is keeping mindful of those strivings, so not forgetting that those are the practices you want to work on. And also practicing the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So as we went through in the meditation, the various ways that mindfulness is practiced and developed and applied in one's life. So cultivating those. And then right concentration is developing calm abiding or serenity, and also the 4 jhanas or dhyanas. There's a different way of spelling them in different traditions. And so this is in terms of mundane, the mundane practice of right concentration. But for the Aryas, supramundane right concentration is having the jhanas conjoined with wisdom. So you have this very strong level of concentration, first concentration, second concentration, and so on. But you're using that to focus on selflessness or emptiness, the ultimate nature of things. And in an Arya, when they have such strong concentration conjoined with wisdom, all of the 8 factors, all of the 8-fold path are present simultaneously. So they can all be present together, performing its own function. And that kind of concentration in the minds of Aryas leads to right knowledge. Right knowledge means knowledge that the mind is fully liberated from defilements. That's when you become an arhat. And right liberation or nirvana. So this is how one uses the 8 factors to attain the final goal of nirvana. So then the next higher training is the higher training in wisdom. And that has 2 of the factors, right understanding and right intention. So right understanding is we have to learn, we have to study. Very important to study what the Buddha taught so that we have a good understanding of the 4 truths, 4 Arya truths. And what is it we should practice? What is it we should abandon? And so on. And His Holiness, in following the Buddha's footsteps, gives some examples of right understanding that can be practiced by ordinary people. He says, understanding that our actions affect others and have an ethical dimension that influences what we ourselves will experience. Understanding virtuous and non-virtuous actions and being able to discern the difference between them. So having a really clear idea of what is virtuous, what is non-virtuous. As practitioners, we avoid the extremes of indulgence in materialism and in asceticism. So the middle way, a balanced way in our practice. Holding the middle way view, we keep our body healthy by eating and sleeping an appropriate amount, but not more than is needed. Since our body is useful for Dharma practice, we must care for it wisely without pampering it. And right understanding or right view also involves being able to distinguish wrong views, such as there's no such thing as karma, no such thing as rebirth, we only have this one life and that's it. No such thing as enlightenment. So those are some examples of wrong views. So being able to understand what views are wrong or incorrect or lead us astray and avoid those, be free from those. And then right thought or right intention, His Holiness says this is of mind of renunciation, meaning free of attachment, and non-malice, not having malicious thoughts, instead having love, benevolence, and compassion. Non-harmlessness is another way of saying compassion. Hmm? Yes, you're right. um, non-harmfulness. Yeah, I have it in my notes. I don't know how I got it on there. Okay, yeah, so renunciation, non-malice, and non-harmfulness. Thank you for pointing that out. So living our life in a way that we don't harm other sentient beings and instead help them as much as we can. And so again, this, what's presented here is talking about mundane right view and right intention. And then the super mundane level of these, no, not yet. The super mundane are the direct penetration of the 4 truths, as well as direct knowledge of nirvana. So that's in the minds of Aryas. So Arya's right view would be understanding the 4 Noble Truths directly and direct knowledge of nirvana. And then super mundane right thought or right intention would be the thoughts and intentions in the minds of Aryas. So this is kind of a rough, simple way of explaining the Eightfold Path according to the Pali tradition. And there's this sutra I mentioned earlier called the Great 40 Sutra. And it talks about these 8 factors. It goes through the 8 right understanding and so forth. And the Buddha explained each one in terms of a wrong side, a wrong aspect, like wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong living. So we need to recognize the wrong side of things and avoid those, abandon those, and then explain the right aspect of each, right view, right intention, right speech, and so on. And he also explained the mundane and the supramundane aspects of each of these factors. And then at the end of that sutra, he says, therein, bhikkhus, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? In one of right view, right intention comes into being. In one of right intention, right speech comes into being. In one of right speech, right action comes into being. In one of right action, right livelihood comes into being. In one of right livelihood, right effort comes into being. In one of right effort, right mindfulness comes into being. In one of right mindfulness, right concentration comes into being. In one of right concentration, right knowledge. So here he's going beyond the 8, adding 2 more. Right knowledge comes into being. In one of right knowledge, right deliverance, liberation comes into being. Thus, bhikkhus, the path of the disciple in higher training possesses 8 factors. The arhat possesses 10 factors. So for those who are not yet liberated, not yet attained nirvana, there are these 8 factors, from right view up to right concentration. And then if you're practicing those, that will lead to 2 extra factors that he mentions here: right knowledge about the abandonment of the afflictions, the obscurations, and then right deliverance, the attainment of liberation, nirvana. So there's much more in the book Following the Buddha's Footsteps. I'm just kind of condensing it here. But if you're interested to know more, you can find it in that book. Okay, so then that's the Pali tradition. And for the bodhisattvas, those who want to follow the bodhisattva's path, it's also necessary to practice these 8 factors. But they're explained a little differently. They're divided into 4 groups, which are called 4 branches. And there's a verse in a text by Maitreya called Differentiation of the Middle and Extremes. So this verse explains the Eightfold Path in terms of these 4 branches. So the words in red are from the verse from Maitreya, and then in black, the corresponding factor of the Eightfold Path. So the first line of the verse says, one that thoroughly realizes, and that refers to right view, first of the Eightfold Path. And for Bodhisattva, right view is known as the branch of affirmation because it affirms the realization of emptiness that occurred during meditative equipoise. So this is talking about an Arya, and when an Arya is in meditative equipoise, they have the direct realization of emptiness. And when you have the direct realization of emptiness, that's the only thing that appears to your mind. nothing else appears except emptiness. So you don't even have the sense of a person over here who's realizing emptiness, or a mind that's realizing emptiness. So all conventional things vanish, and the only thing appearing is emptiness. And so it's only when the Arya comes out of that state of meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, and then they look back on what they just experienced and they realize, oh, that was a realization of emptiness. So they only have that awareness of realizing emptiness afterwards, because otherwise thinking, oh, this is a realization of emptiness, that's like a conceptual thought, conceptual mind, and there's no conceptual mind going on during the direct realization of emptiness. So in other words, right view for the Bodhisattva would be that awareness of having realized emptiness, having the direct realization of emptiness that occurs afterwards, after you come out of that meditative equipoise. Then the second line says, one that makes you understand, and that refers to right intention. And so for bodhisattvas, right intention is the intention that wishes to explain to others the view of selflessness that they realized. Okay, so after realizing emptiness directly, they have the wish to teach that to others and get others to understand. So that's the right intention for a bodhisattva. And this is known as the branch of promoting understanding in others. Promoting understanding in others. And the next line is, the three factors make others develop trust. So that one refers to right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So for bodhisattva, right speech is the speech that explains to others the view that one has realized. So having realized emptiness, then the bodhisattva explains that to others. And right action refers to refraining from harmful physical actions like killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, and so on. So such actions are pure and do not harm others or oneself. And right livelihood for the bodhisattva is as before. So it's refraining from the 5 forms of wrong livelihood, like hinting, flattery, and so on. So these 3 factors are called factors that make others develop trust, because a bodhisattva, to be able to help others, it's necessary for them to feel trust in you. So you need to behave in ways that will engender trust, so that they know you're someone trustworthy and you can be believed. So then when you teach them the Dharma, teach them about emptiness and so on, they're more likely to believe you. And then the last line, or second to the last line, says, as antidotes to those on the opposite side. So that refers to the last 3 factors of the Eightfold Path: right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So right effort for bodhisattva is making effort to develop the antidotes to overcome the objects to be abandoned on the path of meditation. So again, the Eightfold Path, these 8 factors for someone on the Bodhisattva path are mainly on the path of meditation. And on the path of meditation, Bodhisattva needs to overcome the innate afflictions to be able to reach higher levels of the path. So So right effort for bodhisattva is making effort to overcome those afflictions, objects to be abandoned. And then right mindfulness doesn't forget the object of meditation, and so it prevents hindrances to concentration like restlessness and laxity. So the right mindfulness is an antidote to the hindrances for concentration. And then right concentration is the antidote to the obscurations, to mental absorption, the mind being unserviceable that hinders the development of concentration. So those three are called the branch of antidotes to the opposite factors to right effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So they overcome and purify obstructions. So these are the 8 factors of the path. So there's a lot more that can be said about the Eightfold Path, especially in the Theravada tradition. There's even whole books just about the Eightfold Path. There's one by Bhante Gunaratana, something about the 8 steps to happiness. It's a very appealing title. And also in Following the Buddha's Footsteps, the final chapter has a lot more information. I'm just condensing it here because of lack of time. So they are very much emphasized in the Theravada tradition, but as we can see here, they are also necessary to be practiced on the Mahayana path, the path for attaining Buddhahood. I think there's one more slide. So I was reading through the end of the book, volume 4, Following the Buddha's Footsteps, and it contains some additional information about the 37 harmonies, because that's what we have been looking at in this course. And so there's a way of explaining them where they connect with each other and support each other, help each other to develop. And in that way, one can progress on the 5 paths. And there's also this explanation of the conventional and the ultimate aspects of the 37 harmonies. And this is mainly explained in the Mahayana tradition, like in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and also the Ornament, the Ornament for Clear Realizations. So it said that a bodhisattva needs to meditate on how these various practices, the 37 harmonies, how they exist conventionally, but they don't exist ultimately. So the first bullet point, this is directly from the book Following the Buddha's Footsteps. It says the 37 harmonies with awakening must be understood and meditated on in terms of their conventional and ultimate natures. So the conventional is, as we've gone through since the beginning of the course, starting with the 4 establishments of mindfulness on the body and feelings and so forth. So how one practices those different harmonies. And then the ultimate nature, meditating on the ultimate nature, is seeing that they lack inherent existence. So I remember when studying the Ornament, there were often passages from the sutra, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, that would where the Buddha would talk about the Bodhisattva understands that this exists conventionally but does not exist ultimately. So conventionally, it's necessary to meditate on the body, for example, how the body is made of various impure substances, how it is impermanent, how it is unsatisfactory, and so forth. So you engage in those practices, because that's on the conventional level. Conventionally, our body does exist, and it does have those qualities, and we need to realize them. But at the same time, on the ultimate level, all of these things are empty of inherent existence. The body is empty of inherent existence, and the meditator is empty of inherent existence, and so on. So the Bodhisattva always needs to keep those two things in mind. The things existing on the conventional level, but on the ultimate level, lacking inherent existence. So here's what His Holiness says about this. With wisdom and analyzing the ultimate nature, we investigate their deeper mode of being, meaning the 37 harmonies. What is their real nature, their real mode of being? Although they appear to have an inherent nature, when searched for, a fixed, independent nature cannot be found. They appear one way, but exist in another. Reflecting on the emptiness of inherent existence of the meditations, realizations, and qualities we cultivate is extremely powerful because it prevents us from reifying the very paths that liberate us. So we don't want to see the practices that we're doing and the qualities that we're developing as inherently existing and seeing them as very solid. In addition to meditating that the 37 harmonies are empty of inherent existence, we reflect that likewise the I, the person cultivating them, and the awakening to which they lead lack inherent existence. So Bodhisattva always needs to keep those things in mind while practicing, developing all these different practices and realizations and so on. They need to remember all of these things are empty of inherent existence. The I was practicing, the practices I'm doing, the goal towards which I'm aspiring, enlightenment, all these are empty of inherent existence. And there was one other thing that I found interesting in the book. Towards the end of the book, Venerable Chödrön says that she asked His Holiness why the 37 harmonies aren't mentioned in the Lam Rim. If they are so important for bodhisattvas to practice to reach enlightenment, then how come they're not there? And His Holiness said that in the monasteries, the students learn the 37 harmonies when they're studying, especially the first main topic they study, which is they call Parchin, which means the perfections. And that's when they're studying Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations, and they usually spend 6 or 7 years studying that text. So during that period of time, they learn about the 37 harmonies and go into great depth with them. They're also mentioned again in Chandrakirti's. The next subject they study is Madhyamaka, Chandrakirti's text, so they're mentioned there. And then His Holiness says that the Lamrim texts of Lama Tsongkhapa, especially the Lamrim Chenmo, seem to be directed at such people. They're written for people who have gone through those studies. And he says Tsongkhapa's direct disciples were great scholars and geshis, so it seems that he took it for granted that they already knew how to practice the 37 harmonies. And then he went on to say that also in Tantra, for the practice of Tantra, a qualified tantric practitioner also needs to know the 37 harmonies. And he gave the example of Yamantaka, one of the main deities practiced in the Gelug tradition. So he has 34 arms, and it said that his 34 arms plus his body, speech, and mind represent the 37 harmonies. And then the 4 doors of his mandala, so he's inside of a mandala that has 4 doors in the 4 directions. They represent the purification of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the purification of the 4 supreme strivings, the purification of the 4 bases of spiritual power, and the purification of the 5 powers. So therefore, a tantric practitioner must have complete understanding of the 37 harmonies in order to have the proper basis to visualize these aspects of the deity and the mandala. So he again reiterated how important it is to incorporate these 37 harmonies in one's practice, and not just the 37 harmonies, but all the 173 aspects that are mentioned in chapter 4 of the Ornament. We just went through them very, very briefly in previous course. And he says that although these are qualities of the 3 awakened states of hearers, solitary realizers, and Buddhas, and are beyond our comprehension, we can still imagine these qualities and train to develop them. And they must be applied and practiced in our daily lives. This is very important. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to practice, but we just do the best we can. We start where we are, and good to at least learn them, to at least go through the course of study, learn about these. Okay, so we've completed this course, completed looking at the 37 harmonies in a brief way. I hope it's been beneficial for all of you. Are there any questions?
Excuse me, Venerable. People go away very, very fast and I can never catch them. So do you mind? Can we ask them about the test? When is the test?
Well, I wanted to know if there are people who want to take the test. So that wasn't clear to me. That's what I wanted to know. And if there are people who wish to take the test, then I will compose it. And I thought maybe end of December it could be done. I could just send it to people, or send it to Venerable Dundrup, and he can pass it to the people. But yeah, before I take the spend the time writing a test, I need to make sure there are people who want to do it. So that was my question.
Are the people present today? We have quite a few. Yeah, if you could raise your hands, or physical hands, or e-hands, or so we can do a quick count.
Yeah, I don't know if there are other people that are watching later, like not online, but maybe watching later. So yeah, if you could just take a survey and let me know, because the people who are present tonight may not include all the people.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, those who raised their hands. Thanks, Rashika and Stephen. I saw that.
No, not you. No, you didn't want to.
No, I don't want to take a test. That sounds like work.
You're just waving to us.
Yeah. No, I wasn't. No, I did have a question, but no, a test sounds like work, and I try to avoid that at all costs. So.
You had a question?
Of course. Sorry, and I just realized I thought it started at 7, but one of my questions, I have 2. One of them is when you were talking about concentration as far as it concerns a person, super mundane being. When you were talking about the combination of wisdom and concentration, at that level, are they using their high level of concentration to meditate upon realizations they already have? Or are they using that concentration to meditate on different concepts so that they can have a direct realization? Did that make sense at all?
Um, I think that, as a person is progressing along the path, at certain times they will work on developing their concentration, training their mind to stay single-pointedly focused on an object. But at other times they will be working on cultivating wisdom, like understanding impermanence, understanding selflessness, and so on. So they kind of alternate between those two types of practice. And then eventually they need to bring them together. They need to bring together concentration and insight into whatever impermanence, selflessness, and so on, and train themselves to be able to have both what's called the union of calm abiding and insight. And so there's a whole process on how to do that. So I think, to answer your question, it sort of depends on where the person is at on the path.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. If I'm getting you right, it's like they are working on concentration, they're also working on wisdom, and at one point it'll all come together. So I get what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. It was something I read in the Diamond Sutra quite a while ago when I thought I knew what I was doing. But there's a phrase that says, Shariputra, if bodhisattvas, I think this is Diamond Sutra, have any notion of a self, a person, a sentient being, or a lifespan, they are not a bodhisattva. Is that relative to when you said when a person has direct realization of emptiness, that's all they see? Is that kind of related to that? Because I'm thinking that when you realize the emptiness, you don't see a self, a person. So is that kind of related to that, or no?
I think so. I haven't really had the chance to study the Diamond Sutra or the Vajrakutta Sutra. But yeah, my understanding is when it talks about bodhisattvas not seeing a person, that means not seeing an inherently existing person. So when they're in meditation, meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, at that point in time, they don't see any persons. They don't even see themselves, much less other sentient beings, because they only see emptiness. And then when they come out of meditation and they're again involved with people, they do see sentient beings, but they don't see them as inherently existing.
So
I
it's
think
just
that's,
conventional at that point. When they see people, it's just simply on a conventional level, but they realize the emptiness of their inherent nature.
yeah, they know that they still appear inherently existing, but they know that they're not, they don't exist that way.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So for many of these 37 harmonies, you've described them from the Pali tradition and then from the Sanskrit tradition. And it seems the Pali tradition describes them in a way that we can practice as ordinary beings. So I'm just curious about, for a practitioner in the past that didn't have access to the Pali scriptures, or how would they understand these things when they're ordinary beings? Does that make sense? Like, it seems like we're able to look at both of these explanations simultaneously, but wouldn't both, it would seem, like the Sanskrit tradition, wouldn't it also have to have an explanation about how to practice these from an ordinary being's perspective?
Yeah, and they probably do in some texts that maybe haven't been translated yet into English. My guess is that, again, the Ornament for Clear Realization and some of the commentaries I've looked at, they don't have very extensive explanation about how to practice them, but there probably are other texts that the monks and the monks and nuns in the monasteries would have access to, and they could study those and learn more how to practice them, and also maybe going to their teachers and getting more instruction. So my guess is that the instructions are there of how to practice them. But as I mentioned, there was I have this one transcript of a course given by Geshe Rapton in Switzerland on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, because he was a monk in Tibet. He studied in Tibet, and he said in Tibet, in the monasteries, people would practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So they must have had manuals and meditation manuals and oral instructions from their teachers to know how to practice them. Yeah, because His Holiness made the comment that it seems like not so many people are practicing them in the Tibetan tradition, but from what Geshe Rapton said, it sounded like some did practice in Tibet. Maybe they, yeah. So yeah, I guess it really depends on the individual person and how serious they are about really putting into practice the things that they learn. I'm sure that the resources are there that they can turn to for guidance. And like Geshe Dado was saying the other day, in Vasubandhu's text, The Treasury of Knowledge, Abhidharma Kosha, there's these meditations, kind of special meditation practices using the breath. There's like 7 different ones. They're kind of a little bit complicated, not just watching the breath coming in and out, but they're more complicated. But yeah, practicing those is a way of attaining realizations and progressing along the path. So that's as much as I know, my limited knowledge.
Question kind of relating to the bit that you were talking at the end about how, as a practitioner of Tantra, then you have to have a thorough knowledge of the 4 establishments. And so, especially thinking about how this winter retreat coming up, how we'll be doing the 4 establishments. But some of us have like deity commitments, or that's part of our practice. And so my question is like a practical one in terms of how to combine these practices or focuses where, at least in my mind, sometimes they can seem contradictory, where you're trying to visualize yourself as a deity, but then you're trying to be mindful of your ordinary body with 32 parts. So am I walking around trying to see myself and others as a deity, or am I trying to walk around seeing myself and others as skeletons? So is it more a sense of, for the 3 months of winter retreat, or when I'm trying to focus on the 4 establishments, I put aside the deity practice as aside from just keeping my commitments in that session, whereas out of session and when I'm walking around, it's more trying to cultivate a sense of, like if I'm focusing on mindfulness of the body, seeing myself and others as skeletons, and that. How would you go about that? Because I can see my mind's wanting to see them as contradictory, and I'm guessing that's a wrong view.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, my guess is that, and I think His Holiness said this in the book as well, that that ideally one trains very well, thoroughly in these basic practices, such as the 37 harmonies and emptiness, and yeah, the Lamrim, that one is thoroughly trained, thoroughly familiar with those before you even start doing tantric practice. So yeah, so when we're still like at a very basic level with both types of things, my guess is you would just do them at alternate times. So there would be times when you're doing your deity practice, visualizing the deity, visualizing yourself as a deity, but at other times focusing on, like you say, thinking of the impure nature of the body. I mean, my understanding is, and I think this is also Venerable Children, this is that if we don't have a really good grounding in these basic practices, then we're putting more time and energy into tantra practices. We're probably not doing it properly anyway. Ideally, we need strong renunciation, strong bodhicitta, strong understanding of emptiness to practice tantra properly. So probably better, maybe you can check with Venerable Children, but better to focus more on the basic practices and get a good grounding in those. I don't know if that's answering the question, but
Oh, Venerable, I just have one question. Did you say emptiness? Did you say basic thing? Like realizing emptiness, you said that was like a basic thing?
well, basic to tantra.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was
she was asking about doing tantra practices. So
oh,
tantra
okay.
Vajrayana practice is very, very high level, and to be able to engage in those practices properly, one needs very good grounding in Lamrim and the three principal aspects of the path, which are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the right view of emptiness. So they're yeah. I know. I mean,
Well, no, it's just, it
all
seems like
relative.
the more classes I take, I know this isn't the point, but the more scared I get. It's like I learned something new. Like, wait, did Venable just say basic realizing emptiness? I'm like, oh God, like I'm just gonna go to like the hell of stepping on individual Lego pieces for like eons. It's just God, if that's basic. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll keep my freak out tonight.
Well, it's just like, yeah, wherever you're at, where you happen to be. I think something can be basic or something can be advanced. I mean, for me, yeah, emptiness is very much advanced, but to be able to practice tantra, it's an essential basis. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I literally though just kind of freaked out a little bit inside. But thank you. I'm sorry about the interruption.
Yeah, Buddhism is, especially Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva path is very vast and extensive and profound, and there's a lot to learn. So, yeah, try not to get discouraged or scared about it. Just think, okay, I'll practice what I can, like even the four immeasurable thoughts, loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and joy. I mean, that's already a lot to practice right there. And if that's what you can manage, then put your energy into that. If you
Yeah,
can manage more, it's good too. But
I'll
just
definitely try. It's just funny. My friends are always like, "Oh, it's so cool. You're Buddhist." I'm like, dude, Buddhism is not for the faint of heart. I'm like, I think they have that love, light, and bliss thing that Venable talks about. But I'm like, dude, if you really study, this is not for the faint of heart, man. It's serious.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for letting me do this course. It's been helpful for me to learn more about these 37, and I hope it's been helpful for you as well. So let's make a dedication of all the merit, the positive energy created here tonight, and also all throughout the course from the beginning. So feel confident whatever effort we've made to learn and understand and meditate on has been very beneficial, very powerful. It's definitely the cause of happiness and spiritual progress on the path to enlightenment. So rejoice that we've created this merit And then we'll share this merit with all other beings, wishing them all to be free of their suffering and causes of suffering, achieve all the realizations of the path all the way up to enlightenment. And I'll also pray for the long lives of all spiritual teachers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long.
Wanted
Thank
to
you. Good night.
kata on behalf of the participants online to say thank you, as well as myself and other participants here. But thank you for doing this course for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting, Paula.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's very appreciated.